All right, everyone. Welcome to another WineShark Wednesday. It is I, your host, the WineShark. Very happy holiday issues to you all. It's our holiday season shows. All of our shows this month are going to be featuring beautiful holiday season and wines that are appropriate for holiday use. So I hope everybody's having a great start to their week. Kind of hitting the midweek here and trying to catch up on a lot of my responsibilities because I've been, remiss in a lot of things. So, this, that, and the other thing, back to getting WineShark Wednesday up and running. And I hope you guys will come and join us for some of the upcoming events we've got. Schedule your own events if you guys are in the Dallas area and are looking to have some fun for the holidays. I've still got a couple of spots open. So, upcoming things. On Sunday will be our last show at the Reunion Tower. Going to be doing our winter special for wines that are good for all holiday uses. Many of the things you've been hearing me yammer on about here on YouTube, you're going to see there and taste in person, of course, with wonderful food accompaniment. So, and a fantastic view, which is great this time of year. So, anyway, let's talk a little bit about mulled wine, about warm wines, about long tradition, and kind of an interesting start to the wine world. This is a very ancient tradition coming from drinking wine with spices. Dates back actually all the way through the Greek and Roman times to becoming a modern European tradition of warm wine with sugar and such and things added to make a celebratory drink that is usually consumed around Christmas time. So I've got a couple of recipes that I've looked into, some that I use personally, but generally just wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the practical do's and don'ts for your wine mulling pleasure. Several customers have asked me in the course of even just the last couple of weeks about what wines are good for mulling and what mulling is, and they've heard about it and all that. So in short, mulled wine is a traditional warm red wine service with added spices, sugars, and citrus. Those are kind of the three primary components that make mulling different from other options. If you just spice your wine and possibly add some sugar to it, there's an ancient drink called a hippocras, named after Hippocrates, by the way, that is very similar, but is not necessarily served warm, and it doesn't quite fit the same definition. But once we got to about the 14th, 15th century, we started serving these warm. And those three basic components, although water, it was also a component through many iterations of this. Watering down the wine was kind of normal. So part of wine, a little bit of water, some sugar of some sort, spices of various sorts, and whatever citrus you can get your hands on. So typically, we're talking about small oranges, lemons, and limes are in this. Now, when we talk about serving wine warm, by the way, we're going to share with you my particular version here. I don't have the traditional glass mug that you'll normally see through both through England, France, and Germany, and the areas that tend to do this. This is actually a tradition that many different cultures have a variation thereof. When I was doing a little bit of research, just looking up some things on Wikipedia, found some interesting notes. But I've decided to use my shark glass there, so you guys can, if you can see very well the wonderful little shark mouth. I was given this as a gift, which that was my choice for proper glassware today because it's got a nice thick glass to it. So anyway, traditionally served as a hot, as in like a steaming warm beverage, and the preparation of that is something that needs a little technique discussion. So as I mentioned, we've got these components. We've got a citrus component. When we talk about orange, lemon, and lime, generally we're speaking about the peels that are infused into the wine, and occasionally a bit of the orange juice itself, because we're going to make this a little bit sweeter than just taking our regular wine out of the bottle. The spice component you'll be very familiar with in a lot of what we would call the baking spice world, the warmer spices, things like cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, cardamom, and ginger, allspice. These are all things that we think of in, say, pumpkin pie spices. Maybe a little bit of vanilla, some fennel, some star anise. All of these are various options are available to you. So whatever you do the things that you like to have the flavors that you want in your mulled wine. Get as fresh as you can. Like the recipe that I'm going to share out, the Jamie Oliver recipe that I use actually adds bay leaves in there as well. Fresh bay leaves adds a wonderful undertone of green to the recipe. But get what you can and get as fresh as you can. Right? Stale old spices are not going to do the job. You definitely want to get as fresh as you can if you want really good flavor. But I'll be honest with you, it's a great way you can also clean out your spice cabinets come Christmas time. Things that you don't use, like for instance, if you're not a user of clove all the time, this is a great chance to use up a bunch of your old cloves and get them into a purpose that will definitely fill up your tummy with cheer and good times. Okay. Now, the sweet. Sugar, no sugar. Sugar can be added to taste. You don't want it to be an overall really dessert type sweet beverage, but you want to help meld off the edges of the wines that we're going to use. We're going to talk about those in just a second. So I use the recipe that Jamie Oliver has, I think has 200 grams per 1,500 milliliters of wine. For 2 bottles of wine, use about 200 grams. So that's basically 100 grams per liter or per bottle of normal wine. And that's not a ton. That's what I added. I made a single bottle of this recipe tonight, and it's not overpoweringly sweet. It just kind of helps round things together, and it adds a nice middle body to accentuate the wine in a really good way. So I recommend you try it sweet first, and then dial it down or up as you need see fit. But always, try the recipes out in the way that you can do that. But so after that, let's talk about wine. What about the main component here, the wine component? What should we be using? This question, as I said, I've gotten a couple times in the last couple of weeks, and I've gotten it over the years many, many times. And so I kind of have 2 qualities that we're looking for in a wine that we're going to mull. Number 1 is we want something with some good heft and body, right? We're adding all this other stuff to make this wine cocktail. We've got spices of all kinds, and we've got citrus going on, and we got sugar in there. We need something that's going to have enough weight of wine that it tastes like itself without going over the top. Okay, so this is somewhere where you want to basically aim at wines that are in the full-bodied red category. Cabs, Zins, Syrah, Tempranillo, Chiantis, so the Sangiovese grape, right? Petite Syrahs, Petit Verdots, even big, jammy, dark things. There's lots of body. You're going to be great here. The tannins aren't going to matter so much in these wines, particularly because we're adding sugar, spices, and citrus to it. So it's a really broad range. There's no real wrong answer to the one specific. The one that I'm doing tonight, one of my favorites, is to use a Tempranillo. This is a Campo Viejo Rioja Reserva. This is a perfect example of the second quality we're looking for, which is relatively inexpensive. You want a wine that you would put in your mouth already, something that you already find palatable and enjoyable, and then we're going to add stuff to it. So, as my rule goes, don't put anything in your food that you're not going to put in your mouth. Well, this is the same case. But don't necessarily go overboard with any sort of nuance. Any kind of structure and terroir and, subtlety is going out the window when you're smacking your wine around the face with, star anise and cloves. But so the idea that you want is that you want something that's just simple and direct. I use the $10 to $15 price point as the top end that you're going to be looking for here, because effectively you're just adding so much stuff to the wine. You're not going to get all those things that we look for in the more expensive world of wine. Okay, so don't go blowing your bottle of Opus One on your annual mulling wine. So the method, let's talk about how to serve, right? We've got our components. We know what it is that we want. One of the key things, and the reason I like the Jamie Oliver article is, 1, it deals with fresh ingredients, which is great. But number 2, he also describes that you want to separate the end beverage from the preparatory effect. Meaning you're going to take that sugar and your peels and your spices and a little bit of your wine, and you're going to make a syrup out of it. We're going to do the boiling part that basically takes that sugar and gets it to a liquid state, and just use a small portion of the wine to make that beginning syrup that starts off the process. Then Once that's all in a nice rolling boil syrup, then we add the last bit of our wine and drop the temperature down to basically whatever we're going to serve it at. Okay, time is going to work in your favor here, but you don't want the actual wine to be boiling and boil off. I've seen old recipes that talk about boiling the wine. Well, that's great if you want a non-alcoholic mulled wine, because once you get that temperature really going, you're boiling off all the alcohol, which is what happens normally when we use wine in cooking. We want to avoid that. So we use a very small portion to kind of get the syrup going. Then we add the rest of the wine, bring it up to its stable temperature that we're going to serve it as, basically your stove on its lowest setting, and you're ready to go. If you're going to be really formal and awesome about this, as I said, the traditional service is with glass mugs. You'll often see a cinnamon stick and usually a slice of orange in there as a garnish, kind of floating around. I sieve out after the wine has been mulling for a good couple of hours. That's really what you're gonna want to do before preparation before service. You're gonna want to take about a good solid hour before you're ready to serve. Let those spices really penetrate into that wine flavor and not just be an also ran just floating in there. When you do service time, however, I generally take all of the clove bits and because what we're doing is I use raw cloves, I use cracked allspice, I used ground nutmeg, the bay leaves, all the lemon or lime and orange peels. I don't want those floating around in the punch bowl at the actual service station, so I sieve those out. Or if you're really awesome, turn them into a sachet, into some basically like a bouquet garni, where you put them into a cheesecloth, tie it in there, and then that way your guests can serve themselves with a ladle and not get floaties in their wine. But I just took mine, dumped it through a strainer, and then serve it directly out of the bowl like that with garnish at the table. Now, very fancy folks would also say that you have to have a dedicated bowl for serving your mulled wines. There is all kinds of tradition around the flowing bowl. And the idea that this is kind of where the interesting part of the history, I think, comes in, is that we get traditions that begin in this type of beverage, warmed wines with spices and such, are kind of the beginning of the cocktail culture. The concept of punches were basically a communal. The idea of being communal, being celebratory, being open, and more importantly, being served warm was something that basically kept up until about the 18th century, when we started to get into the world of distilled spirits and mixing some of these same principles, basically a spice, a sweet, a bitter, and a spirit. That's kind of the birth of where cocktail culture begins, and this is really kind of a proto version of that, which is fun. Oh, he's saying you haven't had not as much enjoyment of mulled wine from AZ Place Games. Well, that may be a thing where you can dial that in. I think that this is a very personal recipe, so play around with it and decide whether maybe you're getting something. For instance, most of the store-bought things that I have seen, Glühwein is a German version of mulled wine that you'll see. That they have it basically straight up the bottle. I find those to be just pancake syrup sweet and really not that enjoyable. But if you make it at home, you can kind of decide how much how much you add that sugar, which I think is probably the most divisive of the ingredients. Of course, if you don't have a penchant for clove, maybe you leave the clove out of your version. So it's definitely an area where creativity and personality come into it. You might also see, so for instance, in Alsace-Lorraine and in Germany, when they do Glühwein, they also might have it, they add other fortified spirits to it. So you might get something like brandy or rum and mit Schuss with shots. And you have that, mit Schuss, I believe is the pronunciation. And with shots in there, you get even more of kind of a kick, which also changes its flavor. When you do that, though, in the northern eastern portions of Europe, you're going to get vodka. But generally, if you're in France, Germany, Alsace-Lorraine, that area, and the Denmark, Danish areas, you're going to get more of the brandy rum type stuff. And each one of these countries, as looking just through this, has all kinds of individual traditions and names for this stuff. Everywhere in the world, from Brazil to Denmark to, even Chile and Hungary have got their own versions of mulled wine. Another name that you might hear in context similar is wassail. Although wassail is an English tradition that is, generally speaking, cider that has been spiced, I find that in modern culture the two cross over a lot. I think that in our wonderful international culture mix now we get a lot of both sides. So wassail, I've seen wassail festivals that definitely serve red wine as wassail, not cider. So be wary of that if you have a penchant for one or the other. And I was talking to Bob over at Two Penny Beer this afternoon. He even has a recipe that our friend Scott shared that has your favorite ale and a blend of Madeira wine, which is a fortified wine. So we're eager to try that out as an interesting wassail recipe. So it's a great time of year to explore all these beautiful and festive options. And so I hope you enjoy that. Christine Miles asks, can we use artificial sweetener to make it diabetic friendly? Absolutely. Whatever your particular flavor is, as I said, the sweet component is a balancing agent. And so if you are already accustomed to whatever flavor of artificial sweetener you've got, whether it's, aspartame or stevia or whatever it is, as long as that flavor doesn't bother you, in fact, actually, I would bet that with all the wonderful spices and fruit in here, you're going to be able to enjoy it even more. You're not going to taste the artificiality of it. The one thing you might also look out to is to not add the orange juice in, because obviously that's going to be a sugar component that's going to add in there. Instead, you just would stick with the peels. And in fact, you might even take to enhance it further, take those orange peels, lemon peels, and express that oil over the final service. It's a great way to enhance that, a little bit of a citrus note in the very end. I've seen that done with at the glassware area. So people take that lemon peel, throw it in a twist, and throw it in the glass. So great question, Ms. Christine Miles. I love it. But again, feel free on this. This is a great area of exploration where you get to choose what your particular version of this is. There is no real right way to do it. For instance, long ago, we stopped watering down our wine, whereas in ancient times, that would be considered barbaric. And so the idea of watering the wine in the punch bowl was more out of frugality and a way that what we think of in the modern wine world, that wines didn't actually taste quite the same all throughout history. Hence the idea of spicing them as well. Remember that storage techniques, let alone refrigeration, were very different, and we didn't have refrigeration generally speaking, and we definitely had different styles of storing techniques. Corks are only a couple of 300 years old themselves. So these recipes, by adding spices, you're also kind of homogenizing out undesirable wine flavors. Because while wine does, it ages, the product that we think in the modern tense is not the same thing as in historical examples. So one of the interesting parts, by the way, just to go on a weird tangent, is to see some of these examples of how ancient wines would have tasted is a very fascinating part of the art of wine that I'm very interested in. I don't, many wines that we have developed in our modern palate are very, very different from their ancient cousins, and I'm eager to see, where did this all begin? And this is almost an example where we're kind of going back to our roots when you drink this kind of stuff. So I hope you guys have wonderful celebratory times. I'm going to post a link in the description after I shut this down. I'm going to post up the link to Jamie Oliver's recipe for this, and highly encourage you to check that out. And one last note on that. You will also occasionally find pre-mixed spice packs, etc., that are basically just designed kind of like tea bags, and you can just drop them in your wine. You can try those out. I don't have a brand name that I'm a particular fan of, but I do see them on sale every now and again. Basically, it's a shortcut. It's just adding potpourri to your wine, which is kind of cool, and it's an easy way to do that. All you have to do then is add the sugar and heat up. So that's something you should try out. But I think it gives you a little bit less control. I certainly don't think it's this recipe took me 20 minutes top to bottom, and that included peeling 3 lemons and all that kind of thing. So it's so easy. I don't think the shortcut is really that much of an assistance thing. So anyway, I hope you guys have wonderful holiday celebrations. We're going to do more next week. In fact, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about alternate wine cocktails, and we're going to talk a little bit more in the grocery store grab just about some of my holiday seasonal favorites and kind of why they are. We'll see whether it's going to be, but it's generally going to be one of my bigger berry-based wines, something in the Zinfandel, Syrah, Petit Syrah range, because those are such excellent components for fireside sipping and long chats with Santa. So I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday. Until next week, I will be seeing you after some parties of my own. Hopefully we'll report back there and enjoy raising a glass together once again. Until that next time, I have been your wine shark. I'm going to move my cinnamon. Cheers. Also, I think this stuff encourages you to drink fast because now mine's getting lukewarm, and now I need to go back and warm it up again. See? Just an easy, easy trap to get in. All right, guys. Have a wonderful evening.